And in fact, the two major pipelines, Nord Stream 1, which was the main pipeline through to Germany, and that was fully operational and has been operational for quite a large part of this. I mean, the Russians suspended that for part of the time. And then Nord Stream 2, which was a new pipeline, and that pipeline was not operational, but it was completed. Now, what's happened, again, in the last week, is that there has been sabotage. And this is a deep sea sabotage. You know, this is not some, you know, a mistake. This is, you know, an organized state has done this. And many people are pointing the finger at Joe Biden because he said previously he would stop this. And of course, it is in American interest to stop this because it's basically putting a, you know, a position whereby the relationship between Germany and Russia is broken. You know, it's broken in terms of the oil, the gas supplies via Nord Stream 1 and the potential new supplies via Nord Stream 2, because there's quite significant damage to these pipelines. So that they'll have to be, you know, rebuilt, you know, where they were destroyed. But again, the pressure which is being applied, it goes across Europe because of this relationship that they have had with Russia in terms of cheap oil and gas supplies. So if you break that relationship, as Abul Talha mentioned, you are reinforcing the need for NATO, you're reinforcing the need for American leadership of NATO, so you're strengthening that position. At the same time, you are weakening potential foes or potential competitors with the Americans, because the European powers, I'm talking about Germany, France, Britain, and others, they have opportunities, you know, to be a competitor maybe at certain stage, at certain level with the Americans. But if you're putting such pressure on them as this war has been doing, well, then you are basically weakening their economies, and there's been significant weakening of the European economies, and everyone wants the war to end. But you know, the position now is that the Europeans are severely weakened and will not be re-strengthened until this war is over and until the position. Now, I'll just mention one last point, and that is that at the time that the Soviet Union was broken up, we're talking 89, 90, 91, there was agreement between Gorbachev and the Americans in the Western Bloc that they would not expand NATO eastwards. So they have been expanding NATO eastwards, and in fact, they've been expanding to Ukraine. So that was the major factor in terms of pushing Russia to this matter. Russia was not in a position to ignore the expansion of NATO right to its borders with Ukraine. So this is why they initiated this war. And as Abul Talha mentioned,
say, I mean, look, anyone can answer this, I guess, but you know, couldn't somebody say that? I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is that both of you are saying that this is American strategy to kind of, well, it was an American strategy to push Russia for this war. But did America you think the U.S. is okay with what's happening to Ukraine, as far as I guess what's happening to Ukraine, and then in reality what's happening to Europe? Is this what I'm hearing? I mean, you're saying that, look, the game was use Ukraine, lead them to weaken Europe.
Yes, I agree. The point is that, yeah, I mean, the point is that these so-called great powers have always been very happy to use other nations, you know, to do their dirty work. So in this case, several objectives are achieved. You know, the Russians are weakened. Russia is an ally of China, so this causes tension further east. And of course, it causes weakening of Europe, because this is quite a major conflict, a major war in Europe. There's a refugee crisis, people coming out of Ukraine, and of course the economic impact of the oil and gas supplies, which again strengthens the American position because they're a major oil and gas supplier on the world stage. So again, there's many objectives which the Americans are achieving from this war.
Go ahead, Abu Talha. I just want to hear about this.
Well, brother Shirazi, the last thing America worries about is the plight of nations or plight of people, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's inside America itself. Look, almost everybody today knows that.
Saying is in Russia, if Russia gets Ukraine,
Yeah.
I understand. I mean, Russians, I've seen what they've done in Syria and any other place, but I'm saying what Russia is using to get what it wants in Ukraine, this is already calculated by the US. This is what will happen. Half of Ukraine will split, and it's okay for the US to do whatever Russia is doing.
As I said, the last thing America cares about is the plight of Ukraine, integrity of Ukraine, integrity of the people of Ukraine. America is interested in sustaining a world order under its leadership to create conditions so that it can continue to lead the world without any serious competitions. If this is on the account of Ukrainian people, be it. If it's on the account of give 15% of Ukraine to Russia, be it. The last thing America worries about is, oh, okay, what's going to happen to Ukraine? Oh my God, this is too much, and the people will suffer, and Ukraine will be divided. This is not in the dictionary of the US policymakers. Absolutely not. America doesn't care about any of these. America doesn't care about scaring Europe today with a potential nuclear warfare. The nuclear warfare is not being prepared or will not hit America because they will use what it's in Europe. So America, even which is, I doubt it will happen, but even that, America does not care whether this will really make a big hit on Europe. It's already doing it. Europe is suffering, as Brother Jamal was saying, because of the shortage of gas, electricity, energy. The euro is going down the drain. The economy is in deep problem. America, United States, and before United States, it was Britain, called Great Britain. It never cared about the plight of nations. Forget this issue is not in the dictionary of the superpowers. What is in their dictionary is to sustain their dominance. Let me not even use the word leadership because it's not really a leadership. It's dominance, occupation, manipulation of the world. So Ukraine,
But
go ahead.
Brother Jamal, just and I will come back to you, Abdullah. But so let's say if this is this giving an excuse, you think, to China to say that, look, if the issue regarding Taiwan, for instance, I mean, on the other end, is this okay? Is this America trying to maintain the world order, or is it Americans are saying that, look, China could do the same thing in Taiwan and kind of create a multipolar system by default? This is not what you are saying. You're saying that no, even you see what I'm asking. I mean, if Russia can do what it's doing in Ukraine, would that not give a green signal to China to say it better do the same thing in Taiwan? And would that hurt the American hegemony in any way?
It's a good point, and in fact, it is part of the Chinese ambition to obviously reunify with Taiwan. They do not accept Taiwan as an independent state, and it is definitely in their plans. The timing is obviously open to debate. Is this medium term or longer term, or when would this happen? But yes, they want to reunify with Taiwan. They do not accept it as an independent state. And in fact, the Chinese, this is the Chinese territory. And we saw a change in American foreign policy from the time of Obama, where they said this was the pivot to South China Seas, like an Eastern pivot, meaning that they wanted to put more focus there because they could see that China is a growing power, certainly a growing economic power, but not necessarily a global power on the stage, on the world stage, like the Americans are. But again, China has ambitions and it's expanding, and it's obviously a potential competitor in many ways. So this is definitely a factor, but it is not giving the Chinese a green light to do this. We'll have to see what happens and pans out in terms of the Ukraine situation. They just had the referendum, so these eastern areas in the Donbass, have voted, to reunify with Russia. So we'll see how that works out, and in terms of any negotiations and so on. But Russia has taken about 20% of Ukraine and is controlling about 20% of Ukraine. So what they end up with, we'll have to wait and see. But that is certainly their ambitions, and the Chinese ambitions, of course, is to strengthen itself in South China, and also to have economic interests in Africa and elsewhere. So this is a competitor, a potential competitor for the Americans.
No, but I guess, Abdullah, with China, U.S. willing to attack China on the Taiwan issue? I'm just, Russia. Okay, let me ask you, I guess, more of a comprehensive question here. Russia is too weak. Is that what happened? Russia was weak enough that this game could be played, but China has to be maintained. And that's get Russia involved in Ukraine, no problem, but China can't get involved in Taiwan. That would create a problem.
Well, look, I think I have said something on this show before. The issue in Ukraine and Russia is totally different from the issue on the Chinese side. These are, although they came at the same time, crises are being built here and there, but the American policy vis-a-vis Russia or China are totally different. As far as the current war in Ukraine, America wants this war for the sake of controlling Europe and strengthening the NATO and reviving the dead NATO, which the Macron called it dead in the ICU during the Trump era.
Is that true? Do you think that is true? They are saying that something is coming against China. So
no. Let me.
So
Yeah.
they are saying that it's let's strengthen NATO.
No, not against China. Look, the issue of NATO is Europe. The one who is trying to get out of NATO and build their own national security forces and power is Europe. This has nothing to do with China. So the crisis in Russia is totally devoted and focused on Europe. Now, China is a different ball game altogether. China is a growing power now. It's evolving. It has not reached the real level where it can become a real challenge to the world order at large. However, it has always been strong in the regional sense within the Indian Pacific Ocean. That's why America even started the issue of containing China before this issue of Russia with the alliance it created with Australia and Britain, with the other alliance, which is called the Quad Alliance. It started that even before the crisis in Ukraine and in Europe. Why? Because we want to contain China on its own. Now, Taiwan is used as a pivot issue to create and to always burn, let's say, a fire in the border of China. Everybody knows that Taiwan is part of China. Everybody knows that America has taken away its recognition of Taiwan as a sovereign state. It continues to protect Taiwan, but it has officially agreed and accepted that that Taiwan is part of Greater China. But so that's even politically is done. But in reality, America continues to say, "Oh, but we will not allow the re-annex of Taiwan by power, by military power." So there is a different strategy there, and there is a different reason there. And part of the strategy for China is to prevent China from rising to the world level to becoming a global power. And that, by the way, let me even take a few words back. This is after the Trump era. During the Trump era, America wanted China to become a global player. And that's what the Chinese rejected when they said America wants to drag us into a Cold War. What's a Cold War? Between America and whom? Between America and the global power. Until June 19, 2021, last year, America never called Russia a global power since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Obama was saying it's a regional power. Trump was saying it's a regional power. Now America promoted Russia, and Biden came to the NATO last year, to Europe, when the meetings were there, and he said, we will have a meeting with Putin, who leads a global power for the first time since 1991. China doesn't want to play that role, so now China has to be, the lid has to be put on China again. America wanted China at one point to come, let's play, we can promote you to a global power, you have what it takes, you have a big economy, but you have to spend on your armed forces more than you are doing now. You have to burn your economy and your revenue and build rockets, build ships, build all of these military things in order to keep China, although we promote you to a global power, but you continue to be weak. Look, America is playing the devil role in this world. It wants to be able to promote some country to a global power so that it can play with it. It can have a Cold War. It can scare the rest of the world. It become the buggy of the world, just like the terrorism when they created the so-called Islamic terrorism, and they used it for since 2001 until recently, until they withdrew out of Afghanistan. They used Islam, although Islam was a phantom, was not real. Because there is nothing called Islamic State, there is no Islamic system, there is no Islamic army. There are a bunch of zombies around the world who were created, many of them by the United States itself, and they scared the hell out of the world. So now they want someone like Russia or China to say, come on, it's enough using Islam because it's already exhausted. We exhausted the use of Islam as terrorism, as something to scare the world. So that the people will run away to the United States to protect them. So now what do? We need another power. Now, Russia, look, Russia, just like the Soviet Union was stupid enough to accept the proposal of Kennedy to become player at the global arena, and then they collapsed. Putin falls in the same stupid steps. And he thinks that he can be a player with the lion. He's not as big as the lion. He's not as strong as the lion, and he can be destroyed in no time. He can collapse Russia again. China understood that and did not want to fall in that. And they said, look, let us play commerce. Let us only play trading and revenues and technology and sales and only at this level. I don't want to be a political power. I don't want to be political global power, but I want to be a political and military power within my region. I will not allow India to bother me. I will not allow Japan or any other country within the area to really hurt my power and my supremacy. But I don't want to be a global player, because no one plays with America with the current world order and win. This exactly what the reality is, and that's why America is shifting and trying to rearrange the world order. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the world order was in dismay. That's why the United States had to rely on a phantom power, just like what we call the Islamic terrorism under their using their terms. And
Let me
that
come back to this, the
is-
idea
is-
of a phantom power,
Yeah.
because I want to know how these ideas are even put together. That's something that we need to, I want to know how that is done. But Brother Jamal, question for you. You know, India now has surpassed Britain, being number 5th economic power now. I think Britain is maybe number 6 or 7, something like this. I'm not sure what the numbers are. But let me ask you this. Do you think that, I'm not sure if India is smart enough to do this, but is India using the American and Chinese you know, preoccupation to enrich itself through United States? Is that a possibility? I mean,
you're correct. You're correct that India is a large state, you know, with more than 1 billion people, and is a growing state. It is a growing state in terms of its economy and in terms of some influence. But again, it's not a like a regional power. It's not an ideological power. It is dominated by the BJP, you know, this sort of racist nationalist thought. We're seeing problems in Britain now with this Hindutva thing, which is creating tensions and problems with Muslims here. So it's not a power in that sense, but it is a power which can be used. It's a piece on the chessboard, so to speak, as a border with China, as a border with Pakistan and elsewhere. So it's a very important part of that region, and can be used in you know, with its obviously the influence of the Americans, you know, in terms of its leadership over India, can be used in certain ways. But I don't think there's anything particularly significant about India becoming number 5 on the list of
No, I guess what I'm asking is that
more a reflection that Britain is in decline, and there is a very solid long decline Britain economically and obviously militarily and in terms of its influence. So this is the other factor.
No, is there, I guess what I'm also asking is there a possibility for even U.S. allies to try to drain U.S. in a way that, because America needs allies, is this a possibility in a sense that, look, you know, use American economic power for their own betterment? Can this happen? I guess is what I'm asking. Is this a possibility?
Of course. I mean, the American policy is that it will have certain markets, and it will have certain regions of the world which are, you know, trade partners or trading blocs, and you know, they can be used in this sense. And of course, they can be strategic partners. So we have seen how Europe has rallied around the American leadership of NATO, which Abu Talha mentioned was effectively dead, on the Ukraine situation. So it has given life to that organization, which previously didn't have it. And of course, it's created a major economic and other problems in terms of Europe, a potential competitor for the Americans on the world economic stage. So all of these players can be used in this sort of way. So I don't think that India is being used, you know, very significantly at this point in time. But of course, there's a potential there for use in the region, and we'll see what happens further.
I've got a question. You know, when you use the word phantom, for instance, it could be created. You know, is this usul in world politics? Is this, you know, a principle in? Are these principles created in a sense that how they're followed what needs to be done to stay powerful, what needs to be done to. I mean,
Of course.
is this
Brother,
and
of
what are
course.
these principles, Sheikh?
Okay, look, I'm not going to talk about principles in the sense of political science course or study. But if you read the books by I think Michael Copeland, The Game of
Yes,
Nation,
yes, yes.
The Game of Nation, or the Game and the Player, which was one of them was I think Miles Copeland, his name, Miles Copeland, were written, some of them back in the early 70s or late 60s, where he talks about how these games are put on the chessboard and they are played by people who are actually trained to look into world politics and which pawns to move, my pawns, how to force the others to move. So this is studied in their departments and their own strategic institutions, etc. And there is no doubt about that. Brzezinski, in his book, the choices, called The Choices Between Hegemony and Leadership, he talks about this American main principle in maintaining and sustaining a world order, which is the need and the necessity for creating an enemy that we either collaborate with or actually create it to go after. And then he actually criticized the idea, and he said, although this idea has helped America being the almost unchallenged superpower in the world, but it has deprived America from the possibility of being a leader. Because when you sustain hegemony and you bring people under like slavery or fighters or proxy enemies, if you will, then you don't need to lead because you are enforcing your power over others. And the example of Europe is very obvious. America cannot lead Europe. Europe has a civilization much more earlier than America, has its own morals, which are immorals, in fact, but they call them their European morals or ethics or standards, which are way above and beyond what America has. They have a history of peace and war and unifications and disunifications way before America does. So it's not easy to lead Europe. You cannot lead Europe. You cannot lead France or Germany or Britain. You can dominate them, maybe. You can scare them to the point that they come under your umbrella, true, but you cannot lead them. So America found that, okay, I don't need to lead. I need to override, to manipulate, to overpower these nations. And that's what Brzezinski said. Look, whether it's sooner or later, you are going to lose the ability to have hegemony over other states. So you better learn how to lead. I'm not sure now if Brzezinski was giving this as a criticism of the era when Bush was leading, because he came from the Carter so-called administration, the Democratic background, or he was speaking the truth. I believe he was speaking the truth. And he, in fact, one of the main points he mentioned, the main difference and the really antagonism between hegemony and leadership is a statement which he said, look, today, he said, if there were enough nations to stand up in a unity other than Europe, to stand up and challenge America, America will lose its ability even to have hegemony over the world. But he said these nations must have an ideology. And then he concludes that the goodness of America, there is no such ideology that can unify several nations in one, of course, ignoring Islam. And on purpose. It's not that he doesn't know. He knows that Islam can. He knows that Islam is trying to come back and unify nations. He knows that. but he purposely ignored that in his book. And the unfortunate thing is that we were not able to challenge him in reality. We tried to reach out to him or to his assistants to say, let's make a debate on this issue, because there is an ideology that can unify some nations to stand up against America. He was talking about Eurasia, which is Europe and Asia, in fact, which is today they are talking about it a lot, but that does not have an ideology. And that's the same problem with the rest of Russia. Doesn't have an ideology. Today it's only a nation state. China does not have, because the socialism they had, they deprived that, or they emptied socialism from its global message. China never attempted to bring up their Maoist or Maoism or the Maoist socialism out to the world. So they don't. So what am I going to do with the world? Even if I control the world, I don't have a message. Just like the brother was saying about India. Okay, India is becoming economic power. What could India do in Africa to bring Africa or Asia or Latin America or Europe if I want to become a superpower? What type of ideas I am going to bring? Just buy and sell and do technologies? Well, that's common for everybody. What's my principle? We don't have principles. The world doesn't have principles. The only principles that exist, which America is using, democracy, liberalism, liberty, freedom, etc. These are the things that America is bringing to the world, with capitalism, of course. Now, we know that these ideas and thoughts are corrupt. They are wrong. America knows them. America knows they are hoax, but they are using them. And they have created a whole terrain of books and articles and philosophers and institutions and organizations that talk about these issues. And the media and the Facebook and the Twitter and all of these, it's all about bringing up the so-called American idealism, or that's what was called in the philosophy, the idealism versus materialism. That's the idealist ideas. So what I'm saying here is, look, these issues are deeply played within the American organizations. And America was so successful in creating institutions, and that's what they call the deep state. And the deep state has its strategic centers, the Nixon Center, the Rand corporations, and you name it, Rockefeller. And there are tens of these, and all of them are working in almost in tandem and in synchronous in order to keep the principles and ideas and the thoughts and the games, as this is dangerous games. And that's called, they call it games. I did not call it games. Miles Copeland called it the game of nation. And that's what the Trump called it. They said they are playing the games against me when they deposited him, deposed of his rule. So this is the games they play is real. There are people who sit in their rooms thousands of hours to play the world as a chessboard, if you will, and to see what moves are going to make a checkmate.
Brother Jamal, so what political, Europe is politically dead? Is that what it cannot produce any more political, is political innovation dead in Europe? Is Europe dying? What's the deal, Sheikh?
Okay, well, there's a European project which was called the European Union, and the European Union project was including establishment in 2000 of the euro. So the European Union project was to unify the European countries under a common leadership, which leadership was really under the German and French leadership. So they were reestablishing the old European power position where these states and powers were there. Obviously, Britain was a factor as well, but Britain came in later and has obviously recently left. But the point is that the European project was partially economic and partially about the leadership internally within it in terms of the major powers, the Germans and the French, and partially you could see as maybe an opportunity behind the euro to see alternative currency, alternative money, which could be a challenge to the US dollar. Of course, it hasn't worked that way, and the European powers have actually struggled, and we saw that this we saw struggles internally within Europe, because there's like a there's a two-stage European position, meaning that you have the more powerful northern states like the Germans and the French and the Dutch and others, and then again you have the weaker southern states. They called them pigs, in fact. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And so internally, the bloc is actually quite weak and has been having problems, and of course now is facing further difficulty, particularly with the gas and the oil problem, and it will be a very difficult winter, no doubt. So, but the point is that yes, you're talking 400 million people. You are talking about advanced economies. You are talking about opportunity for them to be maybe a challenge on the world stage, but they're not really unified as such. They don't have a strong foreign policy. They don't have a military. There was talk about establishment of a European military. They don't really have a common work in that sense. So they're not really at this point a challenge to the Americans. But of course, the Americans want them to be under their wing, under their control, under their leadership, and the re-strengthening of NATO is an opportunity of how this can come about. It's the Ukraine war.
So just to follow up with what Brother Jamal was saying, Sheikh, I mean, what does it take? I mean, as far as political innovation, what is political innovation in the sense that I guess Europe is. It cannot find the minds anymore. Is this what it is? It cannot find the minds. It cannot. I mean, it has capitalism. It has, let's say, democracy. What is it that it cannot find that it's not able to innovate itself back into the world stage?
Look, I think Brother Jamal alluded to that very well. He said Europe created the project. They know what it takes.
They failed, but they failed.
No, wait. They did not fail on their own. Look, they did not fail on their own. This is how they failed. Europe has been at the beginning under the Marshall Plan, which really overwhelmed Europe with the American money dominance until they started reviving again economically, and they took every possibility, every, let's say, loophole in the political world order to advance this project. That's why as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, now remember the Soviet Union, one of the objective of the collaboration between America and the Soviet Union, which was done at the eve of the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay, was to keep Europe under the check so that it cannot move, it cannot advance. And Europe understood that. And Europe understood that the creation of the so-called intermediate missiles, the missile range, like the Pershing missiles, when America started deploying their intermediate missiles in Europe, so that America was able to move the potential of wars, nuclear wars, to the European arena, not between the Soviet Union and America, but between the Soviet Union and Europe. Understood?
Yeah, look,
Europe.
Here's the thing. Look, you said that, look, no one has any more a message. You have, US is the only one that has, let's say, a message, democracy, liberalism, things like this. So, I mean.
No. I said Europe does. I said Europe is the only one currently does, because Europe is imperialistic state or country by nature, by history. They have longer record of dominating the world or getting Britain, UK was the country that has the sun never sets on its borders. France was all over the world, from Latin America to Africa to the Middle East to Asia. So, and Germany did. Germany had expansionist ideas for the rest of the world. So Europe has what it takes ideologically, politically. But because Europe is so dangerous, America kept it international problem number one. First global problem to the Americans is Europe, to keep Europe under check. Because if you allow Europe to grow, and what I was saying, I wanted to mention this, as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, Europe brought to the light the Maastricht Treaty. Only 6 months after the announcement of the collapse of the Soviet Union, they had that loophole in the world order. So let's do it. Now, they moved ahead. They wanted two more things. One of them they were able to do. The unified currency, the euro. They were able to break into this so-called the euro. But then they wanted the constitution, the unified constitution. And we know how America was able to collapse that idea and to kill it when they did the 2001. See, when 2001, that was the time when the unified European constitution was going to happen. And it was killed.
9/11, you're talking about.
Yeah, 9/11. After that, then the world crisis, global crisis, even the countries who in their so-called internal referendum, like France, who were saying, yes, we are for the constitution. When the real referendum came after 9/11, they said no, they voted against it. The European unified forces, it's part of the project. It was live on their table. But that's why I think one of the reasons we have the current crisis in Ukraine is to kill this idea once and for all. Because look, if Europe is not under the threat, direct threat, which is created by America, Europe has what it takes to come back. It has the ideas, it has the potential, it has the economy, it has the innovative ideas. It is closer than America to the world, because what is America hegemony is? It's try to dominate the world, which is way beyond the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. But Europe is in the middle of the world. It's very close to Middle East. It's very close to Africa. It's very close to Eastern Europe. It's very close to everywhere. And America cannot compete. Europe is very strong, potentially. But America knows that, and knows that their real serious threat could come from Europe. Currently, based on what is on the ground, Islam is a potential. It's not real now. Now it's not. It's phantom. It's not real. There are people who are trying to bring Islam back. We understand that there is Islamization. There are all types of ideas and thoughts and movements. But the real threat on the ground today for the world dominance, to American dominance, is from Europe. It's not Russia. It's not China. It's not the Middle East. It's not Africa. It's not Latin America. It's Europe. And that's why America would pay whatever it takes to sustain its hegemony and dominance over Europe by any means, even if it takes to create a war on its border, or even if it brings the war inside Europe. America doesn't care about France or Germany or others. America is killing what Germany wanted to do, and Europe to be independent from energy perspective. And that's what one of the consultants to the Foreign Affairs Council, his name is Friedman, he mentioned anyone who thinks that the war in Ukraine is about Ukraine and Russia is mistaking. He's making this speech to the Council of Foreign Affairs in America, one of the deep state departments, saying it's about Europe. And he said Europe with the Nord Stream 2 is not only one step or two steps, it's only a few centimeters, few inches away from being independent from American energy supplies. and it can build itself together with Russia and then end to the world with under the dominance of America. So it's a matter of life and death. It's a strategic goal of America to prevent that, and that's why right at the very beginning of the crisis, Nord Stream first thing, Nord Stream 2 was dead, and Germany said we no longer hold to Nord Stream 2, and then now Nord Stream 1 is being killed too.
Sheikh, okay, so to stay on the message that look, you have to have a message in order to stay in this game. Brother Jamal, I mean, what message does China have? I mean, it is a world power. Does it have any message, or what is it that keeps it in power? Just the idea that to stay in as a regional power to protect itself. That's it. That's its goal. That's it. Is that what's keeping it? Or what keeps China moving? What keeps the Chinese politicians working at night? What keeps them awake?
You have to distinguish between a domestic message and an international message. So the domestic message is that they call themselves a socialist state, and they talk of, they have the Chinese Communist Party is one rule power, and they control over the people with an iron fist and a very authoritarian regime. And they have managed to bring a lot of people out of poverty, more than 1 billion people in China, and the living standards have been increasing. So they provide an increasing standard of living for the local people. But again, the external message, I mean, what is their message to the world? Again, this is more confused because it is economic, it is seeking areas of influence, but not as America does, which is on an ideological basis, whereby they're carrying the concepts of freedom and democracy supposedly around the globe, to be under the American hegemony, under American leadership. The Chinese are using the economic opportunity. They have a Belt and Road policy whereby they're opening up various markets across Europe and through Africa, which is an economic project, but also potential greater political influence over those countries. So, for example, they're using loans. They have cheap loans, which they're providing, which is a similar policy to what America, under leadership of the IMF and the World Bank, does. For example, in the Muslim world, whereby you entrap nations. I mean, Pakistan is a good example, sadly, where the IMF is controlling the Pakistan economy. So China is also getting in on this particular game, but they're doing it as a means to expand their markets, as a means to expand their economic relations with these countries around the world, rather than saying, we're carrying communism to you. They're not carrying communism. They're not actually carrying any ideological leadership to the world. They're just carrying the opportunity which they have because they're a major economic player. So that's the difference, really.
So let me ask you this. So let's say, so China is pragmatic, that's it?
It's pragmatic, yes, it is pragmatic, but obviously it does have a certain... No, it has what you call some potential because of the size of the state and the size of its economy and its resources and so on, but as it is now, it is not a major ideological power because it is not carrying a message to the world, and that message, if anything, is really just economic. It's not actually in terms of an ideological leadership, which of course what one needs to do. The Islamic nation, the Islamic Ummah, has an ideological message. والذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. It is Allah that has established the deen of Haqq in order that it would dominate no matter what the mushriks are opposed. So the Muslim Ummah, although it is dormant at this point, is in the process of revival, whereby we need to take back the authority from various regimes and tyrants which are holding the Ummah back, and we establish our state, and we unify our lands and carry Islam to mankind. This is the objective of the Ummah. This is what we are doing. Whereas if you look at China, they don't have such an objective. That they have a sphere of influence in terms of the East and the South China region, and they don't want America and others to be competing with them in that region. But they are not on a scale of the US to be a ideological competitor at this point, and this is the reality in terms of its political leadership as well.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to. All right, so the Muslims, Sheikh Ali, it seems like I know even Abu Talha was discussing. Okay, let's move to the Muslims here for a moment. I mean, what should be keeping us awake at this point? I mean, is it the potential that there could be war in Europe? Maybe I'm stretching it too far. Is it the potential that the US may be, just concentrating more on Europe than the Middle East or the Muslim world, or is there opportunity for the Muslims to see that the world powers are a bit busy with what really matters to them right now, and we have an opportunity?
Look,
This is to me, or
Anyone, you can take that too. I want to know both what you guys think. I mean, or am I overthinking? Because what I heard Abu Talha say is that Islam is no longer on, at least not on the table as it was last 10 years.
look,
Or at least the phantom.
there is a difference between the phantom Islam and the real Islam. Phantom Islam is the creation of America. America wanted this phantom Islam, which is so-called groups wandering around the world carrying weapons. Allah knows where they bring these weapons from, to be the boogie, if you will, that would scare Europe and the rest of the world, so America can dominate. Now, about the opportunity, does Islam have a chance to be an ideology that can unify many of the current nation states? Of course, there is a big potential. The nation states that are potential ones, there are about 54, 55 nation states who all their populations believe in this ideology. So the potential of the rise of Islam to unify these states under one umbrella called the Islamic ideology is huge, is big, and it's dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Of course, dangerous to the ones who don't want to see a real challenge, America in particular, and some of their allies like Europe being the dominant power, imperialistic power in the Muslim world. So Islam does have the potential. Now, can Islam as an ideology creep or rise within the current world mess? In reality, yes. Theoretically speaking, realistically, yes, it can. But that's a big challenge. Why it's a big challenge? Look, based on what we see in the current world order, even states that do exist, they have existence, like Europe, real states. There is a big challenge for them to rise to the real challenge of the world order. And now you don't even have a state. You don't have the state. You don't have your civilization back in order. You don't have the so-called the Islamic ideology implemented at least in one state. So there is a big difference. Here we have Europe that does have the state, that does have the ideology, that has moved big giant steps towards the unification, and still it cannot do it. Now, the challenge for Muslims is number one, to create a state, to create the model of Islam. And then the second challenge is to be able to unify multiple of the nation states within this ideology. And the third is to be able to build almost from scratch, a new economy, new economic structure and military structure. So you have the challenge, which is a very big challenge and lots of things to do. And we are still, as Muslim Ummah, at step number 0. We are there. We are trying to take the first step. And that is one of the biggest challenge, not because we are weak, not because we cannot do it, but because we are facing world powers, their eyes wide open, not to allow a new ideological state to rise up to the arena of the world. So even before we are born as a state, there is a big challenge. There is a big barrier. There is a world power like America.
What
And
is it, Abu Talha? I mean, look, here's the thing. Are we missing, or Brother Jamal, what are we missing? Politicians, we're missing ideologues, we're missing thinkers. What is it that I mean, look, you have the land, you have the people, you have the regions of the world, that, like you said, 54 different countries. What's missing, Sheikh? What's missing to say that, look, here's the opportunity, take it, seize it?
okay, look, before Brother Jamal jumps in, I know he has specific ideas on this, maybe more than me, but historically, to take a leap, because it's not a step, it's a leap upward, is one of the hardest things to do in the whole world history. That's what the prophets have faced, from Nuh alayhi salam all the way to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. It's a leap. It's not just walking a distance, steps. So we need, by time we will do it. It's not a matter of time. It's not a matter of lack of thinkers. It's not a lack of people who are very much committed to this. This is a big leap against barriers which are being built by nations and states who already exist. Look what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced in Mecca. I'm not talking about the years, 13 years. That's not the issue. You see, the message is clear. The carrier of the message is a prophet, messenger. There is no, the people who are with him are the same ones who were able to build the state in few years, but the challenges against them was enormous. And the leap to go from 0 to 1, we call it binary. It's the binary click from 0 to 1. That is a very big challenge. You can never put your finger and say, we need 10,000 thinkers. We only have 9,900. It doesn't work like that. You cannot count it like this. We have done 60 years. 60 years is not enough. We need 5 more years. No, it's not like that. There are challenges, barriers being put in front of you day after day by intelligence, by mukhabarat all over the world, by CIAs, by super states. You are against big barriers. You need to take a leap. What does it take to take the leap? It's lots of things. This is not, I think, the time to discuss that in this last few minutes. But that's the issue. But that leap will happen. And once it happens, then we will talk differently. But you need to take that first leap, whether there is an opportunity, a loophole, or there is no loophole, but you have to work in order to create the opportunity and the condition where you can take that leap in this world arena. And Islam is ready to do that.
And if
Yeah,
I could,
go ahead.
if I could also
Yeah.
add, you know, the potential in the Muslim Ummah is incredible. You know, we have, when we look at our nation, we look at the regions of the world, we have the largest military in the world, for example. We have the most important resources, oil, gas, minerals, gold, uranium, you name it. We are the most important. We have the most strategic locations. You know, the seven most important waterways in the world, you know, from the east to the west, whether that is Suez or the Straits of Malacca in the east, you know, we are the most important in the world. But more important than all of these, we have the Deen of Haqq. You know, we have Islam. You know, this is the motivation. This is the understanding. This is the way of life which the Ummah has, which is a vital spark, which is a vital power, a motivation for the Ummah to move mountains, in essence, which these other nations don't have. You know, they are weak. They have ideology. You know, we see this compromise ideology of the freedom and democracy and the capitalism, and we can see how weak and poor they are. So we have this incredible ideology, which you know is there. The last point I'll make is that yes, I agree with Abu Talha. This is a really big step, but if we look at our history from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if we look forward in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn al-Khattab, you know, we can see that they moved against the two superpowers of the day. They moved against the Romans and the Persians. And this was unheard of. You know, this small Arab nation coming out of nowhere, which came and defeated both of them. But the Muslims clearly were studying the situation. They knew that these powers had been fighting each other. They knew that they had been weakening each other. But still, you know, from that time, they moved the armies, the Muslim armies, and they took on both of them, and they defeated both of them. And this was the massive spread, initial spread of Islam. So we can take heart from this, and we can say that, yes, we're in a weakened position at the moment because we are ruled by tyranny and oppression. But this revival, and it's an intellectual revival, is happening in our lands. You know, the people, the Ummah is asking for Islam, is seeking Islam. It is our job, it is for us, it's for your listeners, it's for your people watching this broadcast to say that we have to be part of this revival. We have to be part of this Ummah, which is going to take back the authority from this tyranny and oppression and establish this deen, establish this way of life, and then carry it to mankind. So whatever the situation, there's always obstacles and challenges, but there is also a great opportunity, and that opportunity we need to grab right now. We need to work with this.
Exactly.
Exactly. We need to talk about these leaps. I mean, and then and the conversation on usul of these, you know, how what it takes to build and to see what needs to be seen. I mean, there is something that I'm thinking about. But here's some questions. We have a whole load of them. It says here, really, I wonder what kind of new ideologies, Europe or any other nation, if America is there, or the other side? It says here, Europe understood that it is being played and will have to risk energy security over the idea of national integrity of European countries. Why didn't any one of them circumvent US game and play it back?
Look, I think this is Brother Jamal's area. Go ahead, Brother Jamal.
Why didn't Europe circumvent in terms of the, okay, we can hear being played at risk over the idea of national integrity. Okay, the position is that when the war in Ukraine came, yes, the Germans in particular were very badly prepared. The changeover from the Merkel regime, which had a closer relationship with Russia, felt that they had this energy security. So this was a weak spot of the Germans and a weak spot of Europe in particular, to this type of attack. So the Americans were quite clever in terms of using this attack because it's an attack on their vital energy resources, and no nation can actually function without energy. So that's what they've done. But since that time, that they have mitigated this because obviously they have influence in other parts of the world, including the Middle East and Norway and other powers, to do what they can to alleviate the problem of the gas supplies. And as we speak, they are still working on this. They have used, for example, their gas storage. Over the summer, they have built the reserves up to about 88–90%, something like that. So they have rebuilt their position. But in essence, they were caught short. They were caught unawares. But that's the reality of this international game of chess, meaning that there can be a surprise move from one player to another, and you have to be expecting that. And I think Europe was in a period of complacency.
Besides, let me add to this, brother. Germany and France, they did try. They both, Macron and Scholz, they went and met with Putin at the beginning of the crisis, tried to circumvent what America wants to do because they understood the whole game. But we know how Putin treated them. He treated them very, very badly, without any respect. So as we would say it, he just kicked them out. He didn't even listen to them. Why? Because Putin knows where his interests are. His real interest, Russian interest, is with the United States. And France and Germany, they thought, at least they tried to circumvent that and to bring, to Russia, let's solve our problem between us. Russia did not agree because Russia has already committed itself to the other part of the game. So the issue here is not whether Europe wants to circumvent or not. It couldn't. It tried. And that was even worse, because when you try to do something and you fail, you become in a much worse position.
So it says here, you say, Sheikh, that brings a new question. So I mean, Europe is then it couldn't even convince Russia to its side. So
couldn't. Look, let me. I will conclude that it could not. Why? Because already America agreed with Russia, and they talked over global strategic issues back in June 2021, last year, June 16, between the meeting of Biden and Putin. America has secured the political arena, if you will, or the concept, or this whole infrastructure of what's coming up. They secured that before they started this whole issue of dilemma in Europe. Now Europe was too late. It's already late for them to talk to Russia. Come on, let's get together. Let's agree. Let's have some collaborations. Let's get Russia somehow in the EU, which is a potential, which was, in fact, again, Brzezinski in his book 1999, he said one of the most dangerous things that could happen is to bring Russia into the EU. And there was a big potential, there was a possibility, and that would have been very, very dangerous possibility to the entire world order. But Europe could not do that. Why? Because the way the Russians think, look at their thinking strategy and style. They think about immediate gains. The Russians, as a thought, whenever they want to do a party, they want to see the immediate gain. What am I going to get out of the party? How many glasses of vodka I can drink? How many women I can get around this? How many pounds or so-called enemies I can kick out from this party immediately? They don't talk about next week party. They talk about tonight's party. That's how the Russians think. The party is going on with America. I'm not going to play to go and dance with the Europeans. So Europeans could not, at least they were late. They were not able to create their own party to bring the Russians to dance with them. America did. America did. They
So
did.
what, Brother Jamal, not enough vodka in Paris?
No. It's. I mean, this is just a symbolic. Symbolic.
No, I'm saying the
Yeah,
French could
yeah,
not provide enough.
Sure. Yeah, America provided them Syria. Look, America provided them, let's go to Syria, play with Syria, go to Libya. And they opened the road for them. And they allowed them to sell and to get money out of these proxy wars. Europe could not do that. Europe could not even think ahead of time. America has already made their own party where the Russians were part of it. It's already too late for the Europeans.
So anyone, just before we finish this, is yani, is Iran invited to party now? What's the deal with this? Is it Russian? Who's obviously it looks like it's very clear the Americans are there, but is this also that is it saying to Russia that look, we allowed you something, but that doesn't mean that you can go into Iran, or is it just letting Iran know don't get too close to Russia or China? What's the deal?
It's exactly the same thing, brother. Same thing. America allowed Russia and allowed Iran actually to buy the accelerators from Russia before the so-called agreements, the nuclear proliferation agreement with Iran and all of this issue. Iran was buying its accelerators and the nuclear devices from Europe. No, America came and made the sanctions against Iran to buy any of these things from companies around the world. The only ones who were allowed somehow, or at least they had the way to do it, is the Russians, who sold most of the accelerators to Iran. And we know that Iran works with America. This is no longer a secret. Politicians understand that, and they know that. Who opened the channel for the Russians to sell Iran the nuclear elements which are necessary for their? In fact, one of the many agreements that were done with Iran when they were trying to enrich the uranium, one of the decrees is to store the redundant or the extra enriched uranium in Russia. Look, I mean, what game can Europe now play? What party it can have with Iran? Russia is the one that was enabled to go into Iran, into Syria, into Libya, and in many other places. So America had already contained the zeal of Russians to their immediate gain. That's immediate gain, I call it. Gain some stuff here. Russians, they don't think ahead. I know Russians. I lived with them for 6 years. They think now. Give me something now, I can play with you. If you promise me something in the future, forget it. I'm not going to play with you. America knows the Russian mentality, and they played on that.
Brother Jamal, just a final question here. I mean, there's a lot, but I guess because of time, it just says, it's a written question. How does one gain the type of insight that you have built? What is, I'm reading the written question here. How does one gain this insight in order to the way you guys are discussing as far as the games nations play? What is the way to gain that type of insight?
Well, the first point is one has to develop a good understanding of the basics, meaning we need to understand what Islam says about these matters, and build from that. So, for example, Allah says, Alif Lam Mim Kullifatul Rum fi Adnal Ard, talks about how the Romans were defeated. But then the verse goes on and talks about how they'll come back. So the question is, Islam is putting obligation for us to study these matters. It's not just a question of that we study the Romans. Obviously, we have to study the current day Romans, in this case, the Americans, and the British and the Europeans, and so on and so forth. So we build from the Islamic perspective. And of course, that provides the main framework in which we're working to establish the next Khilafah state, the Khilafah state which we have to focus on. Now, the other point, though, is that from this understanding, we need to follow the current affairs, meaning we need to read our newspapers, and we need to read a range of newspapers. So we don't want to just read your local newspaper. You want to see what the Americans are saying. You want to see what the British are saying. You want to see the Europeans. You want to see what we're hearing from in the Muslim world and so on. And that way you can see a different perspective in terms of what people are trying to do. And you can also see within that, you can see what their motivations are and what their understanding of the reality is. A third point is, we need to read, as Abu Talha has said, from more of the strategic element. So he mentioned, for example, Miles Copeland and the Game of Nations, whereby Miles Copeland was a former British diplomat who was actually working in the Muslim world, and he talked about how that they would be initiating coup d'etats, for example, and the Americans would do a counter coup, and on and on. So again, this is part of the understanding, but you can also see that there's many think tanks. Lucy, for example, in here in the UK, and Chatham House, and Foreign Affairs, and others that we need to follow, so that we can see what the thinkers are saying about certain circumstances. But the most important thing is to have this ideological founding, meaning that we have to build from the Islamic perspective, meaning that it's no use us just having good knowledge about the Russian plans and the American plans and what's happening here and there. Interesting though that may be, we put that in the context that we're understanding this global situation, because we are seeking to change it. We are seeking to turn it upside down. We are this ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is there to take back the authority and Khilafah ala minhaj nabuwah. This is what the hadith said, that there will be a Khilafah ala minhaj nabuwah, on the basis of prophethood. So we're in this period seeking that. So we want to be involved. We have to be involved in this matter, and it builds from the Islamic understanding. So build this understanding, and then obviously these other things can fall into place.
Abu Talha, final thoughts on this issue.
Yes.
Although there is a question, again, written one, you talked about Copeland, and there is another book, it seems 88 Days to Kandahar. Why is it that the Muslims are not producing these things? I mean, is it, if you can add that to the
Well,
to
let
the
me
final thoughts.
I want to add one thing, which is an interesting story. One of the editors of political journals in Lebanon, in Beirut, back in the 60s, he approached Sheikh Taqiyuddin Nabhani, and he asked him exactly this question: what does it take for someone like me, who is well educated in politics and political science, to be able to understand these political games of the world, just like Sheikh Nabhani was? And would you be able to teach me? And here was the response. He said, you will not be able to understand the political order of the world just like in vacuum. You need the umbrella of that, which is the political idea of Islam, which means to understand Islam from a political perspective, not as a salah and saum and rituals. And for that, If you want me to teach you, you have to learn with me Nizam al-Islam first, the system of Islam, which is how we think about the Aqidah. And from there you can build. Because if you will do it as in isolation, political things will not make up one big piece. It remains as small scattered pieces of puzzles. So unless you have a mission, unless you understand what your foundation is, your aqidah, unless you know how to think about the basic things, the basis of things, which is the what is this world, what is this human, what's this universe, what connects all of these dots together, then you can understand politics. But it's not automatic. You can learn it. And that was the answer. And I think that was what Brother Jamal was mentioning or saying. Look, there is a aqidah issue before you, which you have to understand it so that you can understand the political world order. And to build the games, to be able to make them, you need the first step, which I talked about. You need the state. If you don't have the Khilafah state, you cannot fight a war. Leave alone plan for it. You cannot. You need this. You need a state. The state has the resources. It has the power. It has the ability to utilize all of the resources you have in order to achieve one particular goal. Today, you cannot utilize one simple resource. You cannot utilize the oil. You cannot utilize the gas. You cannot use the gold underneath the ground. You can use nothing. Why? Because you don't have the first step. Now, can we have the first step? Yes, we will. It's not we will. And the brother just mentioned, ثم تكون خلافة على منهج النبوة. It will be there, but it needs you people who are listening to us today and the one we talk around. We need them to put their hands with our hands, and the people are more than ready. Let me conclude with this example, brother. Just tonight, before we came to this meeting, I had a big gathering in my own village. This is called in Arabic sulha, which means to make consolidation between two fighting tribes, tribal. In regularly, what the people, they bring up what's called the mandate of a tribal agreement, and they read it to the world, tribal. So today I was involved. We changed that. We said this is a Shari'i agreement. It's a Shari'i Islamic resolution. And these are the dalils from the Shara for this. And we concluded that the number of people who supported that, and we said we have been dying to see something like this. We are sick and tired of all these tribal things which were happening, that we are going to forgive something for the sake of Brother Shirazi and for the king and for this and for that. Today we are talking only Allah, which means this is a real public opinion, real public support, not public opinion. But it needs the courage. It needs our people, our Muslim brothers, to really support us, to get the courage to stand up and say, look, this must be done according to Islam. Islam is my deen. With my Islam, I prevent crimes. And with Islam, I can resolve issues that rise out of crimes. And then when the people see that, the next step becomes, okay, let's expand this now to the level of a state, not only to the level of a village. And that is what I am talking about, the next leap which needs to happen.
With that, inshallah, we will conclude.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullah khair, both to you, Brother Jamal. Wallahi, we appreciate it. Believe me, I know it's late at night there, but Allah will put barakah in everything that you do. And same thing with Abu Talha. Wallah, Shaykhi, you know, we more than appreciate what the time that you're giving us, because these are the lectures, these are the talks that we need to have. And these are very strategic. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are listening, teachers, doctors, activists. There's a lot of people who listen to these things later on, and they really like the kind of discussions that we provide. And you know, they're very highly, they're intellectual. It's a discourse that they really want to hear. And brothers and sisters, to all of you in general, keep something in mind. We are not discussing these. We are not having these discussions in vacuum. As brothers were mentioning, why are, you know, how do we learn these things? The point is not to just learn these things. The point is that we as Muslims need to realize the role that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the responsibility Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to bring Islam back into the game of nations, and to take over the nations. And really, this is the kind of thinking that needs to be produced, the youth need to think about how we can seriously change the shape of the world. You know, instead of just constantly following the world dictates, we need to figure, with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to dictate to the world what world needs to see. We need to have clear objective. This is the reasons why we are discussing this. If not, who cares what Russia is doing and US is doing and China is doing? There's a reason for this, is to train our minds to be the future leaders of the world with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like the Sahaba did, just like the Sahaba were trained in Darul Arqam. So with that, we will end this program. Brothers and sisters, again, please, some of the books that were mentioned here to read, Rice Copeland, I think was one of them, Game of Nations, some of the others Dr. Brother Jamal mentioned, please go back, read them, understand them, and work with us to change the condition of this ummah and the world. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خير, brother. Thank you.
Don't go to sleep. We still need you guys. Not like.
No, I need to pray. I need to pray Fajr. The sun is coming up very soon.
تفضل شيخي تفضل والله بارك الله فيك الله يبارك يا شيخي.
عليكم السلام.
جزاك الله خير يا برادر جمال الله يبارك فيك يا شيخ أكرمك الله يا شيخ.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Wow, wow, wow.